Greetings, everyone. I'm very happy to have with me today Michalis Kouloumis. A great experience is coming forward with a lot of things to share, really, on a practical level and into kinds of projects and experiences. Hi, Michalis.
Hello, Fadil. Good afternoon. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for inviting me to your platform. I've seen already a couple of interviews from you. It's really, really interesting what you're doing, and well done.
Thank you very much. I'm sure this interview will add a great value to the community and to see what's behind in here. All right, Michalis, let's start with the biography.
Yeah, long story then, and I have to go back quite some years. Um, I grew, I grew up in Cyprus, where I am now as well. This tiny island in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Mhm,
Um, I grew actually in a village where it holds a very simple history, with peasants, with shepherds, very, very simple people.
mhm,
Still nowadays, I have to say, didn't change much because of tourism, something that we might talk about later.
mhm,
So I grew up in partly in a musical family, the family of my father, Elias, and partly in a family that of my mother, who has no relation to music. But they are this kind of people where they harvest the land. They have a tradition of farmers and shepherds. So I inherited different characteristics from both families, so that when you talk about an identity, these all these things are shaping your personality.
mhm,
um Starting from my father's side, who was a prominent musician, although self-taught. He was my first teacher.
mhm,
I um, i owe a lot to him. It's a very sensitive, because we lost him 2 years ago,
mhm,
and we miss this aura that a person has in your lives.
mhm,
So me and my brother, still being professional musicians, we were students of his.
mhm,
So we grew in this environment where our father was always between home and studios, between home and fests, weddings, journeys abroad. So we were always together with him, especially after I became 10 years old.
mhm,
So my father's side goes 3 or 4 generations of people with an artistic side.
uh-huh,
There were, most of them, either musicians, poets, cantors in church,
mm,
um, instrumentalists in general. And interestingly enough, all of this family sang amazingly. At
mhm,
least the people I met, and I am with the last 37 years of my life.
mhm,
Uh, from my mother's side, there were refugees from the northern part of Cyprus.
mm,
So they lost their own village because of a war that happened in 1974,
mhm,
and they lost everything. So they moved to the south, where my mother met my father, and they got married
mhm,
in the village I grew up.
mm,
Um, I was trying to create you know, all these people that infused this musical talent, if you want, in my personality,
Mm-hmm.
and I discovered something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
From my mother's side, her her father was a shepherd, very simple man, very honest, very proud man, really, with his sheep and goats,
Mm-hmm.
and he was making all tools by himself,
Mm-hmm.
crafting everything on hand.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, he was playing the very traditional reed flute of Cyprus, Pithkavlin,
Uh-huh.
and singing along in the valleys, in the out in the fields.
Mm-hmm.
And he was creating this instrument too. I spent a lot of time with him in his workshop, very tiny workshop. Sorry. And he was always playing traditional tunes, singing with me.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was very young. I didn't pay attention to that. But if I recall these memories nowadays, I think they were very precious,
Mm-hmm.
and they shaped partly who I am as well in music.
Interesting. So this is the family background. Now, the encounter of music started in this way. But going forward, is it school or is it something else that brought up more interest into music and instruments?
Yeah, I think every new encounter in life brings something to your own existing material, and they interact with your own roots.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when my father decided for me to get a more formal education in violin, in
Mm-hmm.
music in general, around 11, 12 years old, he was saying to both of us, my brother and me,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be strong in music. You have to create this strength
Mm-hmm.
in your education, not like me, he says, because
Mm-hmm.
he was a self-taught musician.
Mm-hmm.
So until then, until my classical training, if you want, I I experienced music in a completely different way. But when my teacher, Yorgos Ziboulakis, the classical training teacher,
Mm-hmm.
got me into the class, and we started learning all these compositions from Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Vivaldi, etc.
Mm-hmm.
He was very strict. He was very formative, and he had a methodology for this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was struggling to find the balance between the openness of traditional way
Yeah.
and the structure of the formal training. It
Mm-hmm.
took me it took me 6 years, maybe
Wow.
more, to find this balance and say to myself, look, you can take those elements from any tradition
Mm-hmm.
and create yourself. It took me 6 years, maybe 7 years, to be able to decide for myself what are the positive ones from the classical training
Mm-hmm.
and what I have to keep from my early experiences with my father, with my grandfathers, etc. Yeah,
Isn't it an early decision? I think by then you were 15, right?
I was
So
17, 18. I would say, yeah,
maybe that's
early.
a very early decision. People might take such decision at a later age. But maybe tell me more about this kind of training, the classical one and the other one. What were they like, and like in terms of hours, material, practice, so we can understand actually this dilemma of choice.
It's very interesting question. Really,
Yeah.
really goes, it goes into the foundations of learning, actually.
Mm.
And if I can recall my first encounter with my first teacher out of my father, he wasn't a classical training teacher. He
Mhm.
was also a self-taught folk musician, you know. And my father really appreciate this person.
Mm.
And on the way to go to his house, my father was doing the following thing. So he was playing the radio station on the car,
Mm.
and he was saying to me, "Okay, Michalis, what do you think of this piece? Is it a major or a minor
Mm.
piece? Let's say general, very
Yeah.
general. Or which tonality does it
Mm.
play on?"
Mm.
And I was starting to create a map of what
Mm.
is happening really, and trying to understand my own charisma, my own talents,
Mhm.
and cultivate that
Mm.
very early, from
Mm.
10 years old. So my father and my own environment in our family were almost all of them self-taught and amateurs,
Mm.
musicians and artists.
Mhm.
So they always sing, they always sang, they always uh, participated in fests, in weddings. So
Mm.
we all went there.
Mm.
So once a week, we always had a fest, family fest, in one of our houses,
Mhm.
and you can suppose that music was the primal reason to do that.
So you were breathing in music then, by
Yes.
without being aware or no need to be aware.
Yes,
Yeah.
I didn't
Mhm.
play an instrument
Mm.
at that time yet. My
Mm.
father was the main figure, the center,
Mm.
because he was playing the accordion, lauto. He was singing really, really amazingly,
Mhm.
and all of our family followed
Mm.
in songs. So this was my first encounter with folk music. This is how I learned from folk music.
Mhm.
And then my father, as I told you before, decided that at least these two children of the family, because we are three siblings,
Mm.
me, my brother, and our sister.
Mm.
Especially me and my brother uh, got very early in his path to be also musicians.
Mm.
So he decided that we have to do it right. And the model he wanted, it was to have also classical training.
Mm.
And we visited one of the two or three best violinists at the time in Cyprus.
Mm.
We had a lesson, we had a class, we had a small talk. So he decided that he would take me as a student.
Mm.
And I remember, especially the first 3 years, my progress was immense
Mm.
with him.
Mhm.
Immense. He didn't believe that such a student could progress that fast
Mm.
in terms of repertoire, in terms of understanding,
Yeah.
different musical entities,
Mm.
etc.
Mm.
I was very disciplined, actually.
Mm.
I was very focused in violin very early. That's why you were surprised saying that
Mm.
it was very early to decide
Yes.
about these things. It
Yes.
was true. I think I was bit of all the family. I might had this early seriousness of a
Mm.
person, that I had these very well-defined goals in life from very early.
Mm.
And violin, for me, violin was pre-decided
Mhm.
even before my father decided for me. I remember I'm going a little bit
Mm.
in my very early years, 3 or 4 years old. the age of my son now,
mm,
holding wooden sticks and imitating, you know, the violin movements.
mhm,
So it wasn't my father actually who decided for my own path. Surprisingly, I may decide it for myself. I don't know.
mm,
And having this teacher, Yorgos Ziboulakis,
mm,
as my main teacher for 6 years
mm,
during high school, it shaped the way I saw and I see now
mm,
the violin education, the violin training,
mm,
an instrument training. And comparing this to the folk way
mm,
of learning
mm,
an art, a
mm,
craft,
mm,
um, I think if you really want to get deep into a craft or an art
mhm,
such as music, you have to train yourself as well in very well defined paths and steps,
mm,
not just randomly and always passively absorb material
mm.
from the surroundings, but also going towards the knowledge.
Okay. So you define the goals, or you rely on an expert to tell you these are the priority goals? Is it a self decision or maybe an expert decision?
I think the best is to collaborate and to
Mm,
mingle together. When you start, you have no goals. Actually, you have a very
mm,
vague goal that you want to play the violin well, maybe. But the expert knows how to go through
mm.
this.
Yeah.
And slowly, slowly, you become also aware about the steps
Mm. Yeah.
so that you have to be disciplined and study at least 3 hours a day, for example. This is something that you learn.
Mm.
You don't know from the beginning that you have to spend that much time on the instrument.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to.
We will touch into this later when we talk about practice. But now, did you notice at that early stage a conflict between the tastes of music you were playing? You know, the taste of classical versus the taste of what you called it folklore and so on. These are different tonalities, different thought process, different execution process, right? Phrasing, whatever.
That's so good question because it did. Apparently, it did. Yes. I didn't notice. I didn't notice. Actually, when you are immersed into learning,
Hmm.
you always take things, like you're like a sponge.
Mm.
And all these materials, the information you get from all these environments, you think they're all good. They're all things that you can get for yourself. But as you said, the folk repertoire, the folk identity
Mm.
has a different DNA,
Mm.
different approach, perspective, and the
Mm.
classical one has another different one.
Mm.
And I didn't notice that these two were coming together and forming a kind of uh, sculpture,
Mm.
but without a very delicate face on it,
Okay.
very well defined. It was, you know, a
It's being
new.
molded.
Yes, exactly. And I remember my classical training teacher was saying, Michalis, I am afraid that you have to stop playing folk music,
Ah,
he was
okay.
saying to me. And when I firstly heard this from him, was like a knife in my heart, that was killing me because it's as if, killing the air you breathe.
Mm.
Of course, then he said it in a more uh, elaborate way. He
Mm.
explained what he was thinking about it. I understood, but it was impossible to get out of this environment because I was I was I was brought in a musical family.
Mhm.
It wasn't like I was listening to radio or to CDs and then I had to stop listening to radio. It was as if I had to stop, seeing my father or seeing my family.
It's the mother tongue, you know. That's
Exactly,
saying don't speak your mother tongue.
exactly. He was very strict from this perspective, although he knew that if I want to get these delicate nuances of the music,
Mm,
I have to really focus on these words
mm,
and not sharing, you know, I will give you an example. Our classes were two days per week,
mm,
Tuesday and Friday.
mm,
So imagine that I was professionally playing with my father since I was 12, 13 years old.
mhm,
Um, so in the weekends, I was playing with him
mm,
in public, in maybe in tavernas or no, not something big at the time. But still, this environment was into my classical training repertoire, was getting into this style.
mm,
And it was very difficult to distinguish these two styles at the time.
mm.
So when I was going to the class, he was sure enough that I was playing in a fest or in a wedding or in a taverna.
But now we
Because
see the results by now.
sorry.
Now we see the results.
Exactly, exactly. But
Yeah,
you know,
interesting. Yeah.
I spent a lot of effort.
Mm,
I put a lot of effort and spent a lot of time to be able to distinguish the
mhm,
details and the differences.
mm,
When for example, I had to play the classical repertoire, I had to listen a lot to this music
mm,
and be very strict with my discipline.
mm,
When I was going to play with my father, I was trying to follow his own advices and listen to cassettes.
mm,
Yeah, it was quite challenging
mm.
back then.
But it was mostly violin, right? Or
Violin,
both? Mm,
violin, um, violin exclusively violin. Yeah, yeah.
interesting. Okay, let's carry on for the education part, like school and university. Let's cover this part.
Um, when I started learning the violin with a classical teacher,
Mm,
I already was in high school, like 12 years old.
mm,
I was very focused also in school too,
mm,
with really, really good marks,
mm,
high marks, and spending many hours at home preparing my classes.
mm,
Uh, I had enough time also to play with my brother, with the people in the neighborhood. I think it was quite balanced
mm,
in gymnasium between 12 and 15.
mm,
When I went to high school, 15 years old, things got really serious at school.
mm,
Very, more difficult also to follow.
mm,
So I can recall that I spent less time on violin
mm,
with the classical training.
mm,
I remember this, and my teacher was always pushing me, pushing to the limits. You have to find the balance as you did in the first 3 years.
mm,
It's a pity to lose this momentum, etc.
mm,
I consider you as a soloist in orchestras.
mm,
Don't lose this momentum, for example.
mm,
Um, at some point, I lost interest in classical training,
mm,
especially in high school. I lost this, interest of this music and the training that required to
mm,
play, for example, 4 hours per day.
mm,
And slowly, slowly, I was getting away from this music.
mhm,
Um, at high school, I started working more with my father, getting more experiences like really good experiences from TV stations,
Mm.
shows in the TV, radio stations,
Mm.
even recordings. I was participating. I did some uh, journeys abroad in Greece
Mm.
with some dancing groups performing the Cypriot music and showcasing the Cypriot music. So I started feeling that that is my tongue. This is my language, to go forward.
Yeah.
So that was my times around high school.
Mm.
And then 18 years old, I joined the Cypriot army,
Mm.
something which every man here in the land has to follow for 2 years, 26 months. Yeah, that was it was a wasted time, really, of my life. My life was in pause, I have to say, for for this
Mm.
for these 2 years. Although I think I think if I can see this from a distance, um, partly it gave me this perspective of what is following next.
Mm.
What is my life now as an adult?
Mm.
No, living this education, formal education
Mm.
at school. Also, the classical training with my teacher was stopped. I decided to stop, really, not to continue with this music anymore.
That might be the knife you gave it back to him.
Might be. I don't know. No, no. I actually I was a little bit mad with him for the next few years.
Mm.
But actually now I'm in peace
Mm.
with him, and I think he when if we want to talk about later for mentors and people that shaped
Yeah,
who I
will do.
am, this
Will do.
person shaped who I am, and I owe a lot to him.
Mm.
No matter how he did it,
Mm.
he had goodwill, and he really wanted to get my best out of
Yeah.
me.
Yes.
Um, so I passed to the Department of Physics in Athens.
Wow.
I got a really high mark at school to get
Mm.
entrance to this Department of Physics in Athens. Quite
Mm-hmm.
of really hardcore
Mm.
studies.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I loved during my early years. I still love sciences,
Yeah.
the way an analytical thought
Mm.
mind works.
Yes.
Uh, After, it was I was very confusing for me.
Mm.
I was seeing my father as a professional from very short distance,
Mm.
inside our family, with difficulties, with problems, without having enough time to spend with him
Mm-hmm.
as a child, right?
Yeah.
We missed him a lot,
Mm.
and I was thinking, I don't really want to do this to my family,
Mm.
to my own children later on.
Mm.
I would like to have a kind of more proper
Mm.
life afterwards. Of course,
Yeah.
music is there; it's gonna be there. But I was thinking maybe it's not for me to be a professional musician.
Mm.
So I took this decision, and I studied physics. I graduated with a degree in physics in Athens. That was really hard time, and uh, uh, it took me a little bit more than 4 years to
Mm.
graduate in Athens.
Mm.
Although I'm very proud of what I, managed to combine music with physics at the
Mm.
time in Athens.
Yeah.
Um, so I went to Athens to study physics, but after 2 years of being there was something knocking the door in my head, in my soul,
Yeah.
saying that, Michalis, what you are doing? Where is music in your life?
Mm.
I was playing here and there, but not following the path, of my family, if you want.
Mm.
And so I really wanted to get back in track with the violin more seriously. And I asked a few friends what is happening in Athens. Maybe they can suggest advice for a teacher
Mhm.
to follow more the styles of Greece, Turkey, to get more into the Ottoman classical music. So um, I met with my teacher to be,
Mm.
Giorgos Marinakis.
Mhm.
And from the first sight, we met, we got so much bond,
Mm.
like as if we were like friends forever.
Mm.
We matched together very, very well.
Mhm.
And I started being his own disciple, his
Mm.
own student.
Yeah.
And we were together working on Greek music repertoire, folk Greek music repertoire, at least for 2 years
Mm.
on a weekly basis, in a semi-formal way. Like
Mm.
he was teaching in a conservatory in Athens. In the beginning, I started following these classes in the conservatory, and then soon he said, Michalis, maybe we can have also classes at home. I mean, I don't mind coming to your own place and spend more time.
Mm.
So he devoted himself to me,
Mm.
and I did the same to him. These 2 years, it was like shining the star
Mm.
of who I was going to be
Mm.
later on. And that was the critical moment for me to decide back that, you know, it's not your choice. Maybe it's not your choice to to what you are doing in life, but there's some karma behind. I have no
Yes.
idea. I,
So now
I,
this is one side is physics, one side is music now.
yes, yes. You know what? I
Yeah.
followed. I followed the flow of my life.
Yeah.
I didn't continue with physics anymore.
Mm.
After I graduated, I said to myself, "Look, Michalis, you did your decision, but your life is moving with music. Don't
Mm.
you see that?"
Mm.
So that was a critical moment. This encounter with this mentor, this
Mm.
person in Athens, to get back in track with music and then devote myself uh, completely to it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So when did you start your masters after that?
Mm.
Immediately or after a couple of years?
So in Athens, I spent 7 years.
Mm.
I studied in the first 5 years, and then I remained 2 more years to. Um, actually I wanted to live there.
Mm.
I wanted to live there. Back in 2008, the financial crisis entered the door. Like the whole
Mm.
world, as well as in Greece,
Yeah.
very seriously, and it affected all these um, especially artists and people that didn't have a very solid income.
Mm.
They were really uh, affected by
Mm.
it, and everyday life actually was affected too. Getting out in the streets, you were seeing demonstrations. Police were throwing tear gases.
Mhm.
Athens was like in the middle of a of a
Mm.
civil war.
Mm.
It was really hard to live in such a place, and I took the decision to take some time off Athens, get back in my family in Cyprus, settle there for a while and see my life again. So in 2010, I left Greece. I went back to my hometown with my wife, and I spent a few months in Cyprus. And a friend of mine and colleague and very good artist himself, Alexandros Papadimitrakis, I was playing with him music at the time in Athens, told me that there is a university in Rotterdam providing degrees in Ottoman classical music. And for me, this music was a world that I already discovered quite early in my life. Around, I think I was 18 years old when a very good friend of mine gave CDs and cassettes and said, listen to this material, please, Michalis. I think you will love this material. And he was right. I started listening more and more and more to this music. I didn't know what this music was about. I didn't know the names or even the makams. Even it was a language very new for me. Although I'm going a little bit early again for this. In Cyprus, we have a very special case. After the 1974 war, the communities got divided, and the Turkish Cypriots are in the north part, and the Greek Cypriots now live in the south. But we share more than what they can divide us. And we all have experiences with the other side, positive experiences with the other side, either with friends of friends or with music. Especially my family had very good connections with other people, musicians from the other side. And apparently the radio station, if you go back 30 years ago, actually, it was the old style, trying to search for like this.
Yes.
And many times I could find Turkish stations or Arabic ones from Syria, from Lebanon, from Egypt even, playing local music or playing any sort of Oriental music. I didn't know what this was, but when my friend gave these albums when I was 18 years old, I said immediately, I know this music.
Yeah.
It's music that I listened to when I opened the radio station.
It's a welcome back then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when my friend in Athens told me there's this university in Rotterdam that when they provide these degrees in Ottoman classical music, I was immediately so happy to be able to learn again this music from the masters, from people that they know more. And we took the decision, both of us together, to be roommates and go to Netherlands, Rotterdam, to study Ottoman classical music.
Wow.
Yeah, 2011, we got into the university to study the master degree, a two-year degree, to have some research. But actually, the main reason for me to go there was to study with Kutsi Erguner, the maestro.
Interesting.
Legendary musician Kutsi Erguner. And talking about coincidences, it was really special that academic year because the same decision like me was made by other really good musicians to go and study with him.
Mm-hmm.
So we formed like a class of 5 really high quality musicians for the
Mm.
master degree to go and study with this musician, Gutierrez Gunner.
Mm.
So you can imagine having having students of a high level,
Mm.
it gives the teacher as well an extra boost, an
Mm.
extra momentum
Mm.
to work more seriously with the material. And that was it actually. It was a very special time working with this maestro. Um,
Who were these five?
Michalis Kouloumis,
Mm-hmm.
Michalis Kouloumis, and actually he became my mentor in my
Mm.
master research. Stavroula Konstanti, a
Mm.
Cypriot ney player,
Mm.
Yannis Economou, as well as like ney player,
Mm.
and Marina Lyodu
Mm.
Mohammed
Mm.
on the oud.
Mm.
Who else? At least these people were Greek, and I know for sure, and I can recall very precisely. Mm, yeah,
So now
yeah.
you are
This.
four. You are four. Maybe
Sorry.
now you are four yourself.
Yes.
Yes, interesting. So then, after these 2 years of academic foundation for the master, you did a thesis after that?
You start developing your ideas from the very beginning.
Mm.
Maybe after the 6 months, the first 6 months,
Mm.
you start developing your ideas of how you want to form an artistic proposal, they say,
Mm-hmm.
to propose a title for your thesis.
Mm-hmm.
I passed through different ones, I have to say, um, until I found the one that resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
It took me maybe a year. In the beginning, I was searching in different directions to find a really nice topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wanted to study Tatliyai. I wanted really to
Wow,
dive into this world of Haidar Tatliyai, the legendary violinist.
I love this violinist.
I love
Yeah.
him.
Mm.
He was, when I don't remember when I firstly
Mm.
discovered this sound, but the more and more I was searching for recordings
Mm.
from the TRT,
Mm.
from the radio station of Istanbul, I was more and more fascinated by his diversity,
Mm.
not only the arabesque
Yeah.
style,
Mm.
but also into the Istanbul
Mm.
style of
Mm.
his playing. Amazing taksims, amazing taksims. His sound, very bold sound,
Mm.
very technical bowing as well.
Mm.
So Tatliyai was the first figure to study
Mm-hmm.
in my masters. So I took quite a lot of time to analyze his playing, his style, um, transcribe
Mm-hmm.
a few pieces of his, a whole taksim. I
Mm-hmm.
transcribed the whole taksim quite very analytically,
Yes.
and then I was trying to find something more to relate to Haidar Tatliyai,
Mm.
and Kutsir Güner gave me a very nice, bright solution. He
Mm.
was he was trying to create, um, how you call it, an argument. He was
Mm.
trying to create an argument between Tatliyai and something quite of the opposite side,
Mm.
something of another style,
Mm.
to have a differences in style.
Mm-hmm.
He suggested two musicians. One of those two was Nubar Tekiai.
Wow.
I didn't know this person at the time,
Yeah.
And I got in love with this playing too.
Mm-hmm.
The sensitivity and the articulation, the classical way of playing the high positions,
Mm.
the artistry of the left hand,
Mm.
the taxims, of course,
Mm.
the knowledge of makams, modulations.
Mm.
Um, so actually, that was the second cycle
Mm.
for me in my research to study and analyze the works of Tekiai, Nubar Tekiai.
Mm.
And then at the very end, I took some time
Mm.
to compare the two styles, differences, common field.
Mm.
That was very interesting research I did,
Mm.
and very, helpful for my own development as a
Mm.
musician, actually. And the outcome of this research was to be able to create a large scale taksim
Mm.
in
Yeah.
the style of the the great maestros of the time,
Mm.
where they spent 10, 15, 20 minutes of playing a taksim.
Mm. Yeah. That's very
And
interesting.
very interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
That,
Mm.
and for me, that was a challenge because the only way I knew a taksim was belonging to something was mainly to introduce a piece,
Mm.
1, 2, 3 minutes at most,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to create a taksim like a composition,
Mm.
a full-scale composition. That was because of my research
Mm.
in Rotterdam.
Great. So the title of the research is what then?
Oh, uh,
We almost said it, right?
it's been 10 years now. I,
Yeah.
I, I really forgot the exact title, but I,
Yeah.
I, um, I don't know. That was maybe to, uh, I really
It's
forgot, but
about the Taksim and and the style of Haider
yeah,
Katliyai versus Takayai,
yeah,
isn't
the
it?
devel- the
Mm.
formal development, the
Mm.
formal
Mm.
development of Taksim
Mm.
based on works of Tatliyai and Tekiai.
Mm.
The formal development, how the formal structure, let's say,
Mm.
what is the formal structure of a Taksim?
Mm.
If you go and read the treatise of Cantemir
Mm.
back in 17th century,
Mm.
you can see very precisely and analytically how musicians, composers, and the theoreticians conceived of a taksim. Was very clear,
Mm.
even from the 18th century,
Mm-hmm.
with a beginning, a main theme, and an
Or
outro
yeah, or cadence.
cadence.
Yeah.
So if you want to do a formal, let's say uh, a formal taksim, like a
Mm.
statement of a
Mm-hmm.
taksim, and not just a fragment,
Mm.
you have to follow this melodic progression, which is
Mm.
called seyir,
Mm.
the seyir of a taksim,
Yeah.
which is what is the guidelines, the map,
Mm-hmm.
the guidelines from where to start from, where what you have to follow and reach,
Mm-hmm.
which cadences
Mm.
and which flavors you have to reach, and then where to stop, where to finalize your thoughts.
Interesting.
Incredible work, incredible work.
Mm. I think this is accessible to our audience. They can go and search for it and find it, isn't it? The
It
thesis.
is. It's
Yeah.
part, actually, this treatise of Cantemir consists of two parts.
Mm.
I got access to one of those
Mm.
only,
Yes.
and I was lucky enough to ask the library of Codarts to buy one,
Mm.
and now they have one in library about these works of Cantemir. The
Mm.
other one exists in library of the London Library,
Mm.
and somewhere in Paris, another
Mm.
big library in Paris.
Mm.
The two manuscripts
Yeah.
that were created.
And your thesis is also accessible. Your
It
own,
is.
yes.
It is, of
So
course,
people can
accessible. Yes.
search it and find it. But now two things to touch on here, and I think we deserve another interview for this kind of analysis and appreciation of such music for these great masters with you. Two things here to discuss. First of all, the simplicity of expressing what is a taksim, the way Kantamir say it, or the way you say it in your thesis, compared to many other people who are complicating life, overthinking, and I don't know, say irrelevant things about taksim in a way
Hmm.
that people won't be able to produce any. There is a lot of complication that's not really relevant or required at all, isn't it?
I think with anything in life can be either very simple or very complicated approach. It's like this. I think one very famous physicist,
Mm.
Richard Feynman, was
Yes.
saying was saying if you want to be really sure if you know something,
Hmm.
explain it to a 6-year old.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So this is
That's a
my
great.
challenge.
That's a
Yeah,
great test.
it's a great
Yeah.
test.
Yes. Mm.
Um, After so many years of teaching
Mm.
this music to students, to university students, etc., you
Mm.
have to find a way to be able to make it simple
Yes.
and concise. And
Mm.
you know, it's not about simplifying
Mm.
things, but um, saying complicated things in simple words, in a few
Mm.
words. You have to be able to make people resonate, not understand,
Mm.
but feel what a taksim is.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful.
If you can make people feel
Mm.
of a taksim,
Mm.
this is the beginning. This because this is how I learned music too. I felt I
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand, but uh, you know,
Mm.
children they don't want to understand. They
Mm.
want to play music,
Yes. Yes.
and this is what I think we have to create
Mm.
to the institutions out there,
Mm.
not primarily to understand music,
Mm.
but to play music.
Mm.
I think.
Feel and play. Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll come to this later on. And one last thing is your focus into this very individualized sound, very individualized sound of Haider Tatliyai. Very recognizable. This is Haider. I can't
Yes.
confuse him. This is Nobar. I can't confuse him. And now we see you, really, Mihalis, with a very individualized sound. What really constitutes a very individualized voice or of a musician? What is it really that makes a very individualized voice?
Yeah, that is a hard question, eh? It's maybe if I can do a metaphor
Mm.
with this, might
Mm.
be easier to start with.
Mm.
Uh, how do children recognize their voices or their
Mm.
mother's voices from
Mm.
distance, from a crowd?
Mm. Or behind
I
the wall or a door.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
exposure is something very important.
Mm.
To be exposed in styles, to be
Mm.
exposed in the um, nuances of sound, to understand the small details,
Mm.
um,
Being sensitive and listening
being
and
sensitive in listening.
and
Exactly.
reproduction of these observed or noticed nuances, is it?
No, reproduction is always the first step.
Yes.
Is
Mm.
always the first step in creating your own identity.
Mm.
It's inevitable. Of course, you have to pass through it. It's a first step to
Mm.
you always mimic your father's voice
Mm.
and actions and everything.
Mm.
I can see that from my son.
Mm.
But then, as a teacher, you have to give the tools for the student
Mm.
or for your son, for your children to create their own voices, to
Mhm.
be able to be creators
Mm.
and composers.
Mm.
For example, if you if you're learning folk music with the old way,
Mhm.
orally, mimicking, and you always have someone saying, "No, this is not good enough. This is
Mhm.
not exactly like the olds." You will remain uh, always focused on the style of the previous generation. You
Mm.
will not see yourself as part of this route.
Mhm.
You will always say, "I'm not good enough." If
Mhm.
if you have someone next to you, that is a mentor, that is a teacher, maybe that's your father, mother,
Mhm.
saying that play, play freely, play, but uh, don't underestimate your roots, and uh, always say about your roots, and always be proud of,
Mhm.
you know, but find your own soul through this pathway.
Mhm.
You will at some point find yourself
Mhm.
in this picture, in this map.
Mm.
It's not something that comes like this. I passed through different identity crisis,
Mhm.
if you want to say. um, at some point at some point I was 22, 23 years old, and I was trying to understand what I'm doing with Cypriot music.
Mhm.
What is my role? What is my saying in
Mhm.
Cypriot music? Am
Yes.
I am I part of a living tradition,
Mhm.
or should I focus and follow the playing of my grandfather, who was a prominent violinist,
Mhm.
or how my father would like me to play? So
Mhm.
all these questions were puzzling me, of course, creatively.
Yeah.
I was trying to find my own identity related to Cypriot music.
Mm.
At some point, I I was able to find light
Mm.
in this problem, and I released all this tension.
Mm.
I just said to myself, your father is your father, your grandfather is there. We have recordings of them. They will
Mhm.
not be lost.
Mhm.
But you have to follow your own self. You have
Mhm.
to be able to, how you play, you feel good.
Mhm.
Because otherwise it's like a vicious cycle.
Mm.
You are trying to imitate the voice of someone else, but the voice of someone else is one. You cannot
Mhm.
exactly reproduce.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the more you imitate, the more you believe uh, you're not going to be the same, because
Mm.
everybody is unique, and you have to find your unique voice in any
Mm.
sort of music. For example, Ottoman classical music, you will never be able to play Ottoman classical music like someone who lives in Istanbul
Mm.
for his own life,
Mhm.
because the images, the sounds, the encounters she has with anything
Mm.
is completely different than, for example, Aradik Jan,
Mm.
Ross Daly,
Mm.
Socrates Sinopoulos, myself, because everybody has different experiences in life.
Yes.
So we have to give this different self to our
And that's a
playing.
beauty, actually. That's a beauty that we should be careful about.
Yes,
Yes. Interesting.
yes,
Michalis, let's take a pause in here. We would like
perfect.
to listen to some of your new music productions. What would you suggest? Plus, give us a little bit of a brief about it.
there are different things being produced for the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
especially music that I composed,
Mm-hmm.
and especially because of the pandemic, we all, you know, had to stay at home and trying to create something meaningful while being in this state.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for me, that was a very spontaneous movement to compose music. I didn't force anything, and for the last 2 years, I completely instinctively compose new pieces, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been very creative period for me. I would go, I would pick an event Semai I
Mm-hmm.
composed in 2020. It's not yet published in an album,
Mm-hmm.
although we have a beautiful recording, live recording from Belgium
Mm-hmm.
with my quintet, consisting of Efren Lopez.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I
of
love that
course.
recording, really. Love it.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He did the mixing and the mastering himself
Mm-hmm.
of what we're going to listen.
Yeah.
So it's Efren Lopez on the oud, Christos Barbas on the ney,
Mm.
Nikos Avgoustidis on the double bass, and Ruven Rupik
Mm.
on on the on the rig.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Mm.
Yeah,
That's an interesting Nahawan Samai. We'll listen to it.
I hope you enjoy it.
We'll do. Yeah. So, Michalis, tell me about what happened after your completion of thesis and masters.
Um, After I graduated my master degree in Codarts
Mm,
University, I went back to Cyprus
mm,
to, to settle my life a little bit because I was already married to my
mm,
wife, and we thought about, okay, let's get back together and set our goals,
mm.
maybe to move in another city together.
Yeah.
This is what we did. So we moved to Nicosia for a year, to the capital in Cyprus.
Mm,
And guess what? Actually, after a year staying in Cyprus, there was a financial scandal in Cyprus happened with the bankers
mm.
that um, they 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 stopped access from people to get into the banks
Mm,
and have access to their, deposits.
mhm,
That was a really big scandal at the time,
mm,
and it affected all the financial relation, in the whole island.
mm.
So many jobs were lost. The balance between the public sector and the individual companies
Mm.
got bigger and
Yeah.
wider. Tourism was affected a lot by it.
Mm,
And of course, as you know, first of all, um, artists got affected too.
mm,
And that was crucial for me to rethink of my life in Cyprus in general.
mm,
And seeing the opportunities that I have in Cyprus as a professional against living abroad
mm,
made me thought about other options, really getting back
mhm,
to Netherlands or anywhere else, Athens even.
mm,
So after a brief discussion with my wife about this issue we had, we decided to move again out of Cyprus
mm,
the next year, and we moved to London.
mm,
So we lived there for 4 years
mm,
until 2017. We lived in central London for 2 years, and then we moved by the sea to Brighton.
mm,
It's a city in the south part of England.
mm,
We had a great time. We had really great time and amazing experiences
mm,
on a personal level as well as on a professional one for
mhm,
me.
mm,
Um, that is when I created my trio, Michalis Kouloumis trio.
mm,
Um, I had different collaborations with artists, Chidem Aslan.
mm,
I reconnected with Efren Lopez.
mm,
Um, that was easier also for me to travel to Codarts.
mm,
And actually, immediately after graduating my master's, I was provided um, with job actually in Codarts. I could be able to teach there
mm,
uh, as a staff member.
mhm,
Of course, that wasn't um, a standard position
mhm,
back then, but it was the beginning of a career, let's say, in Codarts. So I was easier to travel to the whole Europe.
mm,
And for me, these 4 years made me think more like, musician was always struggling. Being a musician is always a struggle between the art, the craftsmanship,
mhm.
and the entrepreneurship.
Yes.
how you deal with the financial agreements, how you kind of promote yourself in the musical scene, you know.
Yes.
Um, and England gave me very clear direction into that. Like, if you want to really be alive in a musical scene, in the world musical
Mm.
scene, you have to do an effort, and um, you have to have these tools
Mm.
in the modern world
Mm.
necessary for your exposure. Not only
Mm.
your artistic talent in
Mm.
music, but also some other
Mm.
tools
Yeah, interesting.
to work with.
Hmm. Then from then you got this career and you are busy maybe with the composition, workshops, teaching, private lessons.
As well.
Yeah, and these workshop seminars.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know,
Mm.
it was much easier for me to travel as well
Mm.
for all these opportunities,
Mhm.
teaching, recording uh, with big orchestras in BBC,
Mm.
Abbey Road in London.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, you know, for example, there are some artists, Anwar Brahem, for example,
Mm.
for many years he lived in Paris,
Mm.
and it was easier for him to access recording studios, um, TV shows, etc. But after a big period of his life, he moved back to his home country.
Mhm.
And you know, Anwar Brahem is it's a legendary artist. Whenever he
Mm.
leaves, he can travel from there.
Yeah.
And for me now, this is a deal
Mm.
to, you know, we stayed 4 years in England,
Mm.
and then I felt that that was a circle
Mm.
soon to be closed, you know.
Mm.
And then having the thought and the need to have to raise family and to have
Mhm.
children
Mm.
together, that wasn't an ideal place to be. England, London, for example, or
Mm.
Brighton. So we moved back to Cyprus to have the opportunity to raise our child
Mm.
with our wider family,
Mm.
and
Breathing the same air.
breathing the same air. Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, once you are established, I think it's much easier to travel
Mm.
and to connect
Mm.
with the wider musical scene.
Mm. Interesting. Let's talk about the masters and mentors
Hmm.
before we depart. Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
when you create something
Mm.
that is a composition, that is a sculpture, or anything
Mhm.
you create, you believe that this belongs to you, right? This is yours,
Mm.
and it's partly true, but it's partly not true for me, because who who are you is not only defined by you,
Mhm.
it's defined by the people who um, exposed you in different environments
Mm.
and experiences
Mhm.
and knowledge. Um, and for me, these are the people who have to pay tribute to
Mm. Mm.
in our lives. I think there are so many people. Actually, I was starting saying to you in the very beginning that in January, I took some time off to think about so many people
Mm.
influenced the way I am and who I am.
Mhm.
And they are not only musicians, they are not only people affecting my musical career, actually.
Mhm. Mm.
And it's interesting to mention these people too. For example, of course, our parents, my parents,
Mm.
my father, as well as as my first teacher.
Mm.
But my mother too, the way um, the way they teach
Mm-hmm.
their children, how to be disciplined, how to
Yes.
follow a daily schedule, for example, in life,
Mm.
affects your whole life. So starting from there, um, I would go to my grandfather, Pieris Pieretis,
Mm.
a prominent violinist in Cyprus,
Mm.
who had the luck and the
Mm.
he was so lucky to live in an era where uh, people got very simple lives without
Mm.
many obligations, and
Mm.
they were very um, mm, self-reliant.
Mm.
They didn't expect bankers to give loans in order to have happy
Mm.
lifestyles.
Mm.
So my grandfather, he was one of the few musicians that influenced a lot of other and especially newer generation
Mm.
musicians with his playing.
Mm-hmm.
Pieris Pieretis, his name. Um, Surprisingly enough, he didn't teach me
Mm.
privately, or like we didn't spend time together
Mm-hmm.
uh, in a room, let's say, teaching me the dances or the tunes from Cyprus.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was thinking, okay, every week we're spending time together. We can be together anyway. We live so close in the same village. He doesn't need me as much
Mm.
as to be next to each other. Although I think that would be really more beneficial to me if
Mm-hmm.
that would be the time to spend. Um, Getting out of family, um, I should say one more time about my classical training teacher,
Mm.
Yorgos Boulakis,
Mm.
and I owe him a lot about my discipline.
Mm.
When your father says something to you,
Mm.
it's real and true and he loves you, but you don't follow that.
Mm-hmm.
You may say this after many years that he was right, but at the
Yeah.
time when they say this to you, you cannot follow your father's advices. So
Mm-hmm.
my teacher served as the person at the time who I could follow and be very disciplined.
Yeah.
So I owe him a lot about this part of my personality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, of course, Yorgos Marinakis, my teacher in Athens, who
Mm.
opened my view in and exposed me in the whole new repertoire
Mm.
in Greece,
Mm.
the Greek folk repertoire, which actually, if you can see on the map the Greek territory, you
Mm-hmm.
can see it's a very small country comparing to Saudi Arabia, for
Mm.
example, or Turkey
Mm.
or Germany, France. But um, because of different historic moments, and of course, it's the position of Greece on the map, as well as
Mm.
Cyprus too,
Mm.
affected the the population displacements.
Mm.
So many people from completely different areas on the planet, especially in
Mm-hmm.
Europe and Middle East,
Yes.
traveled through Greece.
Mm.
That's a very important reason for the blending
Mm.
of traditions
Mm.
in Greece. So, for example, you have the Greek islands, which is completely Atlantic music,
Mm.
and the setting is violin and lute.
Mm.
And then you have the mainland, which is very mountainous,
Mm.
and the setting is not violin and lute anymore, it's clarinet, for example,
Mm.
and lute, or any other combination. So this teacher gave me a very good insight about these idioms in the Greek music. I owe him very much.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, he was a real mentor, Fadil. He wasn't as much disciplined as my classical training teacher, but he took me over from how I was conceiving myself at the time, being or not professional musician, and he believed in me, and that's the reason maybe I am here today talking to you, because he believed in me and he showed me my capabilities, if you want, or as a real
Potential.
teacher, potential.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, these are now four.
For
Yeah, or five. Your parents, your grandfather,
grandfather,
your first classical teacher, and the
and
exposure to the repertoire of
exactly.
Greek music.
Then
Mm.
I I definitely uh, I definitely consider a mentor of my life, musical life especially, but also during our uh, relationship in Codarts,
Mm.
Kutser Güner.
Mm. Yeah.
He's such a sweet personality, such a sweet person.
Mm.
Um, you
Mm.
know, it's one of those people who lived 10 lives.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
really like this. I mean, when he describes his own experiences with legendary musicians of Ottoman classical music,
Mm.
you ask yourself how he managed to live
Mm.
uh, and uh, and tell these stories. I mean, it's incredible.
Mhm.
Um, and his capability and ability to transfer this knowledge
Mm.
is also very important, because, you know, when you are virtuoso on an instrument,
Mm.
most of the times you don't have the sensitivity of transmitting this knowledge to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people, most of these people are autistic, some kind of introvert
Mm.
uh,
They don't
behavior.
invest time into communication and teaching, and yeah.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
Kutsia Gunner paid a lot of attention and spent a lot of time to all of us in
Mm.
Codarts, and I can see this now as a teacher there to the
Mm.
newer generation of students. He has so much his patience is amazing. Very
Mm.
patient,
Yes.
very patient human being. I owe him a lot. I owe him, actually, he gave me the window of Ottoman classical music,
Mm.
not only from the perspective of a musician,
Mm.
but also of a poet,
Mm.
of an author, or of someone who loves Ottoman classical music in general, in the context of history, in the context of Istanbul as a
Mm.
city.
Mm.
And that was very important at the time for me.
Interesting. Mm.
Um,
These are like the main masters and mentors, huh?
I think so. I
Interesting.
think I am,
Interesting.
yeah,
Mm.
apologizing for someone who I maybe if I remember something later, I will mention.
All right. What about the instruments that really took most of your time? We know about the violin. What
Yeah,
else?
yeah.
Mm.
You know that the violin wasn't the first instrument for me to pick up,
Mm-hmm.
although I was mimicking
Mm.
the movement, the mechanics of a
Yeah.
violinist very early.
Mm.
My first instrument to hold was a guitar at school.
Mm.
I was 9 years old.
Mm.
I was 9 years old. Um,
Mm.
yes, So I picked this instrument, guitar, at school. I was 9 years old. There was a need for a student to get a guitar in a local orchestra at school. So they gave me this guitar.
Mm.
The teacher showed me very basic things.
Mm.
I started getting close to this instrument. I was able to play basic chords, basic melodies on there. But then the violin took over. Actually, a year or two later, I
Mm.
started going really deep into the instrument. And that was the instrument I felt more connected to anyway.
Mm.
Years passed. Guitar was always there as a
Mm.
side instrument.
Mm.
Of course, I didn't practice, I didn't study with anybody, but it was that instrument that gave me the window to play freely without any need to practice many hours,
Mm.
any obligation with any teacher,
Mm.
to be disciplined with. I played songs with my friends, pop music at school. It was this window for me
Mm.
to have gatherings with friends. It was really very beautiful time with guitar.
Mhm.
After many years as a professional musician nowadays,
Mhm.
I have to confess, guitar is an instrument to hold,
Mm.
for me to be able to compose music. It's
Uh-huh.
amazing to tell, but it gives me another perspective in music,
Mm.
because violin, it's quite monophonic instrument.
Mm.
It's very difficult to produce harmony on the instrument.
Mm.
So uh, some of my compositions were developed on guitar,
Mm.
and that's a very interesting thing to see.
Mm.
In general, anything you learn can be a tool for you to work later on.
Mhm.
um, so this is all about guitar.
Mm.
Of course, we spoke about violin,
Mhm.
and I have to say, viola is an instrument which I love a lot, and I consider it equally uh, touching
Mm.
my soul as a violin.
Wow.
Yes,
So no jokes and no
no
belittling of
jokes anymore.
viola.
No jokes, unfortunately, anymore.
All right.
Uh,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
I lived in London when a very good friend of mine here in Cyprus had
Mm.
a viola at home,
Mm.
and he told me, Michalis, you should come and play it.
Mm.
I don't know why he chose me to. He didn't know that I like viola or whatever. Maybe the sound of this instrument triggered something on the music I play. I have no idea. So we went there with another friend. I played the instrument. I liked very much. The sound was very bold, very sweet, mellow, also almost like a human voice,
Mm.
very middle register.
Mm.
Um, and then I took the instrument like this, holding,
Mm.
and I never do the opposite. I always try first the sound. If I like it, then I see the instrument too.
Yeah. Mm.
And then I said, it doesn't seem a very expensive instrument from the look.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says, yeah, how much do you value? How much
Yeah.
would it cost, for example?
Mm.
I don't know, around 2,000 euros. I said. He started laughing because he bought it from a Chinese factory,
Mhm.
from a workshop in Shanghai,
Mm.
about 300 euros.
Mm.
But immediately when this instrument arrived in Cyprus, he transferred it to a luthier, a great, great luthier,
Mm.
just to reshape and reset the instrument,
Mm.
good strings, etc. Just to try the instrument, because you don't want to invest
Mm.
just paying many thousands without knowing the sound.
Yeah.
So I was surprised. I was shocked by this. And I said, okay, I didn't have any viola at the time. I didn't expect myself to play on a viola. I said, okay, I want to order one more viola for me from the same workshop. I don't mind, 300 euros. And then in total would go something like 800 euros for the whole thing.
Yeah.
So this is what I did. I ordered one more viola from the same luthier. And this is a viola I play on from
Wow.
there. And of course, I do different tricks with tunings. I have very good strings from Pirastro. The name of the strings I hold is Eva Pirazzi,
Uh-huh.
Eva Pirazzi Gold. They cost like a third of the price of the viola. It's very expensive strings.
Yeah.
And you know, I actually, for me, this is a very interesting turn point in talking about prices in instruments. Because, of course, a good instrument is a good instrument. But what about the musician itself who plays the instrument?
Yeah.
Does this affect to the sound quality, or is it all about the instrument quality sound? How do we deal about these qualities?
Yeah.
It's a very important topic to discuss, especially with luthiers.
Yes.
When I showed my viola to the luthier here at Cyprus, he started laughing because he said, "Oh my God, these Chinese makers, they destroyed our work because the work they do is stunning.
Yes.
It's really good quality work." Yeah, I don't believe in very expensive instruments, to be honest. I
It
don't
is
believe.
the musician investment in his time and practice and production of sound. And the basics should be there, right?
I agree. I
There are
agree.
basic foundations in the instrument.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, exactly. Mechanics, good. Everything has to be in order, of course. But then prices can be also trends, can be also a global market of investments and all of this, especially on violin. Um, so yes, viola has been my most recent exploration and discovery, and I don't hold back. I am super immersed into the viola playing. There are concerts. There are concerts only playing viola. Really.
Interesting. Michalis, I would like to ask you about the violin also. The setup, the tuning, the strings that you like, and then let's see some live playing on both, whatever you choose.
Yes,
Mm.
I can play on both. Yes,
Yeah.
my violin, my violin is a German one. I
Mm.
bought it from an auction in London.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't hold a specific name
Mm.
of a luthier, but it is definitely from a workshop um, in Germany, and it's handmade.
Mm.
Well, that was built around 1850s,
Mm.
so it's more than 150 years old.
Yeah.
It's a very good solid instrument.
Mm.
Um, when I firstly played on it in the auction,
Mm.
you know, you go to an auction and you have the opportunity to play on more than 200 instruments.
Mhm.
Uh, so you have to have a plan for that if you want to really play on all those.
Yeah.
So you don't look, if you are a musician, you don't look on the violin, you just play.
Yes.
So this is what I did. And I played many violins. Once I had the chance to get this instrument on my shoulder,
Mm.
it completely resonated with my, you know, with my world, how I conceive good sound.
Mm.
And of course, when I played this violin, all people did this. in the room. And my friend following me says, "Oh my God, that wasn't a good sign."
Yes.
The good thing is that for investors, that wasn't a very good
Mm,
option to invest, because
mm,
uh, they always want a violin that has a brand,
mm.
you know. But for me,
Yes.
that wasn't the case. For me, the sound was
Mm,
the leading point.
yeah.
So I bought it finally. I managed to buy this violin from there.
Mm,
Um, and I hold the strings I always wear on my violins are still Pirastro,
okay.
from the brand Pirastro, and they are chrome core. Chrome
Okay.
core are not expensive strings, and
Mm,
actually quite recently more and more classical musicians, even soloists,
mm,
hold these strings on the violins.
yeah.
Um, it's a very good, solid brand.
Mm,
I'm quite very happy with it, although you have to play a lot
mm,
if you want to have different styles. I mean,
mm,
for example, if I want to play folk music, this is this is it. This is the setting I always like.
mm,
If I want to play more sophisticated, more classical repertoire, more contemporary stuff,
mm,
I lack a little bit the depth of the
mm,
sound. But yeah, it's always a compromise, with strings.
mm,
It's a little bit of a compromise.
mm,
With my viola, I told you, with Eva Pirazzi, I am done. This is it.
mm,
I am fully covered. I'm
mm,
super, super happy.
mm.
Um, where shall I start from? Violin or viola?
Wherever you like, whatever the call is saying.
I will go for violin first, so I will leave the viola at the end.
Sure.
To,
And it's up
uh,
to you if you like to go for Taksims or some Cyprus kind of music is up to you.
yeah. Um, so I will choose to play a traditional tune from Cyprus on the violin.
Mm,
Cypriot music, it's not yet discovered by musicians around the world.
mm,
Maybe not even from ethnomusicologists, I have to say. Now
mm,
it's now being discovered by them
mm,
slowly. It's an it's a new territory,
mm,
and all these times I go for workshops, seminars, concerts in Europe,
mm,
and I always play some tunes from here, from my homeland.
mm,
Many people uh, express, their reactions, positive
mm,
reactions about the material,
mm,
the pure. There's a pure sense of
mm,
not roughness,
mm,
kind of roughness of a land
mm,
that was conquered by so many
mm,
so
mm.
many civilizations, and it's all inhibited there. It's all
Uh-huh.
encrypted, if you
Mm.
want, and there is only us that we can get it back to the people.
Interesting.
Yeah. I would play I
Mm,
would play a 7/8 beat
mm-hmm,
tune.
mm,
It's one of my favorite, and it exists also in my debut album Soil,
mm,
on the track Mantra.
mm.
Mantra. Uh, you can find this name also in Turkish, Mandira.
Okay.
Mantera. Mantera, it's actually that place where shepherds hold their animals, their livestock,
Mm,
safe.
mm,
In Greek is mandra.
mm,
So yeah, we share the same name, But not only, I thought this piece was Cypriot, you know, one of the
Mm.
tunes that we can say that is indigenous from the island.
Yeah. Mm.
There are not many tunes indigenous here in the island, actually,
Mm.
and very few songs are really, we can say this is from the island. Most of them were transferred by refugees, by merchants,
Mm.
by musicians from Smyrna, Istanbul, Greek islands, Cappadocia,
Mm.
even we can say from the Arab world, one or two pieces.
Mm.
I can play one of those maybe as well. So
Please.
mantra,
Mm.
the interesting thing about mantra that
Mm.
I want to always say that there is a recording of Jamil Bey, Tambourine Jamil Bey,
Mm.
in one of the albums of the archive of his own performances,
Mm.
where he plays a taksim, I think it's Hijaz taksim, and at some point
Mm.
he moves into a rhythmical improvisation
Mm.
and he plays this tune.
Mhm.
Of course, I discovered this the recent years. I didn't know the existence of this. I thought mantra was a traditional Cypriot tune. Enjoy.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I will play, of course, in the style of Cyprus, okay?
Please. Beautiful. Beautiful.
You can see the roughness of this
Yeah.
tune. Actually, this is a male dance,
Mm.
and it's a showing off dance
Mm.
with tools
Mhm.
from the fields.
Mhm.
They always hold a sickle
Mhm.
and they dance, showing off the weapon, let's say,
Uh-huh.
showing off the power.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not a war dance, but it seems like showing off the power of the man.
Mm.
Yeah, it has this power, the masculinity, let's say.
Mm. Very interesting.
Um, and another tune that I want to
Mhm.
play for you on the violin,
Mm.
it's called Yasemin, to
Okay.
Yasemin,
Mm. Mm.
and it's the jasmine actually in English.
Mm.
Actually, Yasemin is the same word in Turkish,
Arabic.
Arabic too, eh?
Yeah. Mm.
So we understand each other then. Uh,
So just tell us about this piece, Mihalis.
If you go to Nicosia,
Mm,
Nicosia is a capital of Cyprus,
mm,
and it lies in the middle of the island.
mm,
And during the summer months,
mm.
it's very dry and very hot during the day, but at night, it's still manageable to live in, like in a desert,
Yes.
like in a desert, like
Mm,
the whole Arab world.
mm,
Very beautiful at night.
mm,
It's very, there is a breeze coming from the northwest,
mm,
uh, chilling the atmosphere and making it very lively for people to
mm,
get out.
mm,
And jasmine,
mm.
jasmine,
Yeah.
it's a nocturnal tree, nocturnal, like it opens its flavors during the night.
Yeah.
And actually, it's when people also get out,
Mm-hmm.
because during the day, it's impossible to walk out in the streets.
Mm,
It's very warm. The stones
mm,
are super warm to walk and to
mm-hmm.
enjoy anything.
Yeah.
So people get out at night celebrating life, their loves, walking in the streets of Nicosia, of the old town, and it's full of jasmine. It's full of jasmine
Mm,
um, outside of the houses. It's very
mm,
characteristic of the Cypriot architecture. There's
mm,
always jasmine uh, on the fences
mm,
of the houses, and you always smell jasmine at night.
mm,
And for me, if you translate literally the lyrics of this song, it
mm-hmm.
tells the conversation two young people hold, like a man and a wife, a
Mm,
man and a girl.
mm,
And let me roughly
mm.
translate the whole lyrics, because
And this is
really
a Huzam flavor, right?
uh,
And the previous one was which makam?
mantra was based on Hijaz,
Hijaz. Okay.
pure Hijaz. And
Mm,
actually, this is when I teach Hijaz,
mm.
or 7-8 pieces. Mantra is one of the first
Core.
in.
Mm,
Yes, 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 pure. Although
mm,
the last phrase, if you can remember, it goes to Chargya,
mm,
to Chargya, instead of holding the Nim Hijaz per day,
mm,
and then towards the landing
mm.
goes back to Hijaz. It's very interesting
Yeah, yeah.
to see this.
It's very colorful, really. It,
Yeah,
I got a sense of Husseini too in there, sometime maybe.
maybe
Mm,
in this phrase, yes,
mm,
this Husseini
mm.
opening,
Yeah. Mm.
there's a flavor
Very
of
colorful.
Husseini.
Yeah.
Hmm, hmm. So the lyrics of Yasemin,
Mm,
it's imagine,
mm,
imagine a young boy, a young man,
mm,
going to visit the house of the young girl,
mm.
at night,
Yeah.
and just to have a, how to say it in English, to pass through the house and see each other's faces and eyes.
Mm,
So this is where this song is sung. Actually, true.
mm,
It says, «Το Ιασεμίν στην πόρτα σου, Ιασεμί μου, ο τσίρτα να το κλαδέψω, ο Ιαβρί μου». It
mm,
says, «The jasmine in your door,
mm,
my dear,
mm,
I came to clean it up.
mm-hmm.
And then your mother thought that I was going to catch you and leave from the house.» Yeah, it's
Yes.
all about this. It's all about this.
Interesting. Very interesting, really. Thank you to
Um,
take us actually in all of these kinds of great experiences in one shot. This is really like combined.
Yeah,
Pleasure. Yeah.
when I
Mm,
play music, I always think of
mm, mm,
a multi-layered
mm.
experience.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes your mind goes back to your child
Mm-hmm.
at times, early
Mm,
early times. Sometimes your mind travels to a journey
mm.
in Istanbul, for example. You had a very beautiful moussaka, or you ate baklava.
Yes.
Anything, you have to make those experiences alive. And this
Mm-hmm.
is what about music. This is what music does.
Yes. What about viola then?
What about viola?
Yeah.
On viola, I will perform a small taksim,
Mm.
um, and you will understand why. First of all, let me introduce you into
Mm,
a setting that I didn't see anywhere else.
mm,
Um, so I was experimenting at the
mm,
time I bought the instrument
mm,
with different tunings,
mm,
and having the traditional, let's say, classical tuning of viola, which is
mm,
La, Re, Sol, Do, or
mm,
A, D, G, C.
mm,
It didn't, it was very nice,
mm,
strong, very nice, but it didn't give me access to the classical repertoire,
mhm,
because the tunings of a viola normally don't match with the ahenks
mm. Yeah.
of Turkish classical music.
Yes.
Bolahenk, Bolahenk, Kız, Supurde, etc.
Yes.
Mansur. So
Mm,
it didn't give me access to that music actually.
mm,
So I was trying to find tunings that I could have a gateway
mm,
to this music, to this
mm.
repertoire with my
Yeah.
viola.
Mhm,
So I experimented quite of a time,
mm,
uh, and I finally found a
mm.
brilliant way to set this instrument for that music, which is what
Mm,
all strings, of course,
mm.
are detuned by three semitones.
Okay.
So instead of having A on the high
Mm,
string,
mm.
this is F sharp,
Yes.
three semitones lower. The
Mm.
same occurs on all other strings.
Okay.
So it's quite low tension.
Mm,
But if you have good strings and not very thin
mm.
strings, this can give you enough tension and good sound for this low tension, to play music on. Let's try. Let's listen.
But what did you do for the other tuning? Did you keep the same interval for the other strings? Like you
Yes,
went F sharp and then you will
B,
go D minus three semitones, G minus three, and so you kept the
exactly.
same interval.
It's all in fifths. I keep the fifths
Yeah, yeah, fifths.
intervals.
And the same for violin, or you keep changing the tuning because some prefer to
Mm,
change the tunings.
we didn't say anything about the violin, it's true.
Yes, yeah.
I do more experimentation with the violin
Mm,
from time to time. Um, for now, I keep it 440. I keep the same
mm,
tuning, but
yeah,
I have different other tonal tunings
yeah.
according to who I'm playing with,
Mm.
or there is another. I will speak about later
Sure.
after finishing with viola.
Let's go here. Otherwise,
Yes.
our viewers will kill me. Allah, Allah, Allah. So beautiful.
Yeah.
So we have to leave our violins and go for violas now. Try our luck. This is so beautiful, really. So why a Taksim? You said you will tell me why a Taksim. No.
Yeah, I need some time to get out of this,
Yes,
but
yes.
and
Actually,
I
I lost you while playing. You were not there. You disappeared.
uh, I think viola resonates more to the human voice
Mm,
than the violin. Really, there's
mm,
some very velvety
mm,
quality in the viola,
mm.
especially that the voice of a man. You know, our voices, which are
Yeah.
a little bit low, but in general, I think human voice it's not it's not equivalent to the register of violin.
Mm.
Violin can be harsh at times,
Yes.
especially in the middle and high
Mm,
pitch. Viola, even in the high register, it's still there's still some nasal
mm,
color
mm,
still within the human
mm,
register, and the resonance of the
mm,
instrument
mm,
creates this energy for those who listen to this instrument.
mm.
They immediately, all of us, when listening to that instrument, go get emotional, if you want, or we resonate immediately
Yes.
with anything that is played on the instrument.
Mm,
It's
mm.
incredible. The potential of this instrument for me is it's
Mm,
huge, and it's a pity that it's
mm.
underestimated for many musicians.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, the previous model
Mm,
of such an instrument in Ottoman Empire was sinekeman.
Yeah.
Sinekeman was an instrument played by violinists too
Mm.
in the 17th, 18th century
Mm.
in Istanbul by Greek, by Armenian and Ottoman musicians.
Mm.
And it was actually the, the instrument between the old medieval times,
Mm.
early music times,
Mm.
viol da gamba,
Okay. Yeah.
to the violin that we know today.
Yes.
So sinekeman, it's this instrument in the middle of this transition.
Timeline. Yes.
Yes.
Interesting. Interesting. It's really a great playing that we have experienced here. You brought us to nature, man. It's very convincing. Let's hit into the tuning of violin before
Ah,
we go to the next discussion point.
yes.
So, yeah.
So the violin, it's such an, I mean, you can never say you are a virtuoso on violin. You
Mm.
can never say that. You can never say
Uh,
you are playing enough of this instrument.
okay.
You know, there's so many unbelievable violinists out there. All these years. I mean,
Yes.
from the time that it was developed until today,
Mm.
there's always progress
Yes.
on this instrument.
Mm.
Technically,
Mm.
of course, I mean, the compositions, very technical compositions were created for this instrument. It's amazing. And then, of course, when you play a taksim on violin, doesn't mean anything to Europeans, but of course for us,
Mm.
it means.
Yeah.
That's why it's endless and endless possibilities also to experiment with this instrument.
Mm.
And this is what I did as well,
Mm.
trying to find my identity in the music I play, especially when I play in duo, in
Mm.
trios, like a chamber setting orchestras,
Yeah.
small amount of people.
Hmm.
Um, I always felt that the tuning of the violin is very harsh, is very tensed.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I don't remember when, but I remember that I said to myself, okay, let's try different tunings now. Let's try to detune the instrument a semitone lower.
Mm.
Let's see how does it react,
Yes.
the quality of the instrument.
Mm.
And I liked it very much.
Mm.
I liked it really, really very much.
Mm.
I played a few taksims on that setting, that tuning. When I practiced things like more folk tunes, I didn't like it that much. It didn't have uh, good articulation and
Response. Mm.
response.
Mm.
The attack was
Yeah.
missing.
Mm.
So that is not a very good thing to, if you want to play folk music, you have to go the
The other
opposite
way.
side.
Mm.
Exactly.
Mm.
But then from there, I experimented and raising slowly the tuning.
Mm.
I was going a little bit comma by comma
Yeah.
upwards, and I found amazing results. Not
Okay.
not always,
Mm.
but at some points, my violin, resonated well with some tunings.
Okay.
So, for example, 415
Mm.
hertz
Yes.
La
Mm.
tuned on 415, then 432
Mm.
it resonated very well,
Mm.
or 437
Mm.
instead of 440, a little bit lower than this 437.
Yeah.
That was a very beautiful energy coming from the violin,
Mm.
quite more relaxed sound, but
Mm.
still with attack and good response.
Okay.
So 437, it's a tuning I most of the times work with in concerts even.
Mm. Interesting.
Because, you know, if you play solo, you can decide any tuning you want. But if you play with an oud, with kanun or whatever, it may not resonate well with the instruments.
Okay. All
So
right.
it's always,
Now, Michalis, with your exposure to all these kinds of musics, what intervals you will do? Like fifth, fourth, the Turkish tuning, the Arabic, your own local one. What is it? What is a good interval between strings?
you mean the relationship
Yeah.
here
Do
on
you
the
go fifth?
instrument?
Do you go fifth, like interval of fifth, or sometimes exceptional? You know, the Persian people, they have maybe 24 tunings for every kind of dasga or yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, I would like to have
Mm,
the possibility to
mm,
have more violins in a concert and have different tunings according to the dasgia, you
mm,
know.
mm,
um, I respect that a lot.
mm,
I really respect that
mm,
because every makam
mm,
holds a distinctive DNA, a distinctive color
mm.
sequence.
Yes.
It doesn't fit everything on the fifths. It doesn't fit everything on one instrument, you know.
Mm,
um, I mainly use the fifths.
mm,
I mainly use this. I experimented also with the Turkish one,
mm,
re, la, re, sol.
mm,
Um, it, I didn't like it much. I don't think that was the case for the old violins. That was a modern approach in Turkey,
mm.
and it doesn't fit well. The instrument is not in balance. The tension is not in balance like this.
What was the old Turkish? Any
I
idea?
think I think there wasn't any before
Standard.
this. It was a sinekeman
Yeah.
and lira, kemenche.
Okay.
The violin didn't have a long tradition in Istanbul
Okay.
to have, to have experiments with the tunings.
Mm. So for you, you like fifths.
I like fifths. I like fourths, like
Mm,
the Arab style,
mm.
re sol re sol. I like this.
Yeah.
Fifths, four, fifth.
Mm,
I like this. It's more balanced, much
mm.
more in balance. And actually, like this, it keeps well the tetrachords.
Okay.
You can move from the high to the low without any problem.
Two octaves.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And your own most favorite is the Western tuning?
Yes, this is a one I,
Mm.
because I am also trained
Classical.
classically.
Yeah.
I have the capacity to go the higher positions as well.
Mm. Will it
So I
affect the tuning when you play Rust or Bayati or whatever? Because, sometimes you don't need a La.
mm,
La is not maybe the good open string,
yes,
so you will avoid it, right? In this case.
yes, you avoid it or you play in closed position.
Okay. All right.
You play. I mean,
Mm,
of course, La for Arabs
mm.
is Husseini, but for Turkish is Neva.
Yeah.
If I play,
Mm, mm.
so La for Turkish is Neva here. So in Ushak we use, but if I go to the Arab, this
Mm.
is Neva.
Okay.
According to the makam,
Mm,
depending on the makam, I change positions. I go to the third position on the violin.
mm.
If I need to hold the color correctly,
Yeah.
you know, um, I am very sensitive with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Interesting.
every every makam, every
Mm,
sound
mm,
has to be taken very seriously
mm,
in taksims, in songs. So being able to play on higher positions
Mm.
actually helps a lot.
Yeah, wonderful,
Helps a lot.
wonderful. Actually, we need the discussion, detailed discussion on this. So better to forget it for now. Let's hit into a few more points before we conclude. I'm really enjoying this discussion,
Me
Mihalis.
too. Me
I'm
too.
sure the viewers too. So, can you give me an idea about what is a great practical, or what you called many times disciplined practice for such kind of music that you do? What do we do for a good practice session, or what is there in the session?
There are many layers, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In my experience,
Mm,
one layer is to always listen to music,
mm,
expose yourself in listening to music,
yeah.
either from everyday life sources like radio, Spotify nowadays, some playlists of your phone. Be able to expose yourself into material that either you are going to play at some point,
Yeah.
or new material that you have never listened to,
Mm,
or things that you played before,
mm,
just to refresh, just to be there, just to, it's like, it's very important to consider music as a language. How would you improve your vocabulary? How would you talk
mm,
with someone else, not your family or friends, but
yeah.
someone you don't know,
Yeah.
in good words? And how
Yeah.
would you express yourself in more detail? You
Mm,
read books, you watch some nice shows on TV or Netflix or whatever.
mm,
Um, you have chat with people.
mm,
You expose yourself in quality discussions.
yeah.
Thinking alone always helps. The same with music. I find myself a lot in this layer I'm talking about, listening to music.
Mm,
Um, I even if I'm doing something else, I'm always whistling or singing,
mm,
um, or thinking about music,
mm,
thinking melodies. Um, Another layer for an instrumentalist is to get their instruments at their hands.
mm. All right. Yes.
And this is the most serious one. This is the
Yes.
most serious one.
Yes. So, what do we do when we take our instruments? Do we
Spend
just
time, spend
play
time with it.
randomly, or is there a discipline? I really like how many times you say discipline today.
Ah, yeah. There are some routines that you have to pass through.
Mm,
I will get a small parenthesis. The last
yeah.
year, I am immersed into the world of running.
Mm,
I run a lot, 5 to 6 days per week
yeah.
with a coach. I'm going very seriously now.
Mm.
I'm just following the flow of my life. And I can see how much discipline athletes have in their everyday lives.
Mm,
Um, it doesn't change.
mhm.
Whatever the weather is, the
Yes.
discipline is there, has to be there. And cold or hot, windy or humid, Christmas or Easter or any other festivities, they have to keep going and they have to continue,
Mm,
unless they are injured, of course. But
mm,
if they are healthy, the routine has to stay. And I see many similarities between a musician and an athlete.
mhm.
Many similarities.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic also to teach
Yeah.
young musicians towards the routine and the discipline.
Mm,
Um, you have to sacrifice time if you want. You have to invest time, if not every day,
mm,
most days of the week, at least at least half of the days of the week. You have to get the instruments out of the case or have it there open like I do. And then it's much easier to just get the instrument into your hands. Um, from the time you get the instruments of your hands, there are different routines. You don't immediately get into the repertoire, or for example, now I am a little bit cold. So when I was required to play a few pieces for you now and the viewers, I was feeling my fingers quite cold and not dexterous enough to, so you have to warm up your fingers. Half an hour, open strings, just to feel the energy going and coming in your body, breathing normally, even walking while playing. It's a very nice routine I did, and I sometimes do as well. Walking in the house just randomly to circulate, to feel energetic. Spend half an hour with open strings, maybe some trills on the left hand, some motifs. Motifs actually are the ground stone of our musics in general in Middle East. Iranian, Arabic, Greek, Turkish, Balkan, we all base our music in motifs, in sequences. So start exploring this world of motifs in the beginning, easygoing, not very hardcore speeds and very fast passages, quite easygoing. Try also, I would definitely advise everybody, try to tune the perdes. Try to tune your fingers into the makams you enjoy most. By playing tetrachords, by playing open strings with a fixed note, try always have an open string, especially for the violins, open string while playing on another string a motif, so that you tune the tetrachords.
Like a drone.
Exactly.
Continuous drone,
Yes.
Interesting.
Then another routine I always do is to move freely to positions. Move from the first, third, fifth, and back, or different other combinations. And then the most important thing I do in my practice is playing taksims. I get into the taksim very easily to, not long, but just to work with the phrasing, and you have to work your phrasing. You have to be it's all about the vocabulary. You need to expand your vocabulary as a musician, not to repeat yourself over and over again. And then sometimes you get something new on the fingers, something that you never played it before. Stay there, stay and practice this. Stay, maybe record yourself. And then after having this, if you have left any time, play some pieces. Play some pieces that you have challenged, maybe fast pieces, or new pieces that you always wanted to play in a concert, in a lesson. There's so many things. My most important discipline is to stay away from the digital world. This is distractions. Get your phone on flight mode immediately after you start playing the instrument. Even without a laptop, if you can work all these things without a laptop, scores, etc., it's much more helpful for a student, for a professional even. No distractions from the digital world.
Interesting.
Really.
Interesting.
Um, and then if we have the capacity
Mm.
to have at least one day per week, a session with other people,
Okay.
to play with other people,
Mm.
just study together,
Mm.
just play together without any goal, having a concert or etc. Just
Mm.
having the chance to play together.
Yes.
This is something I missed,
Mm.
in everybody missed in the quarantine, in the pandemic,
Mm.
of course. Uh, but I considered it a very, very important element. Playing together. Music is always about playing together.
Mm. Yeah. You once told me that the fuel for the musician is to get exposed to others, to
Yes.
work with others. Otherwise, even the feeling can die, right? Which is a
Yes.
very, very strong statement, actually. Yeah.
It, it is. I strongly believe this.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You know, there are many theories about
Mm.
art, how art was discovered, how
Mm.
what is art,
Mm.
and what an artist is doing really. What is the purpose of art in our lives?
Yeah. Mm.
It's a long story.
Yes.
We might need not
Some
one
other time.
more, yes, to analyze this. Many
Yeah.
philosophers spend their own lives
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
about art. But I think
Mm.
very elementary approach is that we need to interact with each other,
Mm.
and art is such a means
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
communication. We need to interact.
Yes.
You might compose music at
Mm.
home, but deeply inside
Mm.
you are proud of yourself because someone else will play it, or
Mm.
someone else will listen to it and say, uh, I
Thank you.
like it so much. I like you.
Yeah.
Thank you for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Michalis, I mean, what you describe about the experience of practice and what it works reminds me of another question, which is, what was a waste of time for for the musician in throughout the timeline? Things that people should avoid, actually.
You mean through their own education,
Yeah, yeah,
practice?
like the making of a musician.
Mm.
There are things that people might have thought it was useful, it might have added a value, but actually it was not needed. There are more important things to worry about.
I less and less worry about a career.
Mm.
You know, if you think about a career and about
Mm.
how is gonna be your image after,
Mm.
you lose now. You lose a concentration of
Mm.
what are you doing now for you.
Yes.
What is a career?
Mm.
It's a very general and very vague term, a very Western
Mm.
entity,
Mm.
building a career on something.
Mm.
It's all fake and it's all very distracting, really,
Mm-hmm.
to the real essence of what everybody's doing, not only artists.
Yes.
Everybody is doing something good for the humanity, for the world. Um, so I would advise to think less and less of this. Just be yourself. Try to do the best of yourself.
Mm.
Try to be the best of yourself every time.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
um, waste of time, eh?
Yes. Even at the practice level, some kind of things that maybe attracted the attention and maybe took some time and maybe money and whatever. And then we discovered that this is not needed. Should have avoided in the first place.
I would say something contradictory. I would say something that, yeah,
Yeah.
I would, I would, I would never go anymore to conservatories.
Mm.
I think this education, that actually makes people, students,
Mm.
um, feel that once a week you have to be active with your instrument,
Mm.
and then I add small steps of your learning knowledge
Yeah.
on a weekly basis, and then you have exams at the end of a year in front of a committee, and then you get a level up, and then up, and then up, and of course, and this is paid.
Mm.
It's not from the government. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an institution. It's all useless. It
Mm.
doesn't serve the purpose of learning.
Mm.
Learning is a different thing, and learning can occur differently in people. Some people want 2 weeks continuously working with the teacher, with the master,
Mm.
10 hours per day, and then rest for two
Yeah.
weeks.
Mm.
Some others need not only 1 hour per week, but 3 hours in order
Mm.
for the machine to
Mm.
start working efficiently. 1 hour per week with a teacher, I don't think is anymore a model for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not also sure about the university
Mm.
purpose anymore.
Mm.
The model of learning in universities, especially for practice-based
Mm.
fields.
Mm. Yeah. Interesting.
I think we have to rethink of these models
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, I am, I am, I am, I'm suggesting a lot having experiences with workshops, seminars.
Mm.
I think this is a really good model
Mm.
of people having the need to spend
Yeah.
30 hours
Mm.
continuously with other students
Mm.
on a circle,
Mm.
on a very relaxed environment, away from their houses, also
Mm.
important,
Yeah.
away from their own families. And
Yeah.
uh, so there are different models. I think
Mm.
uh,
Interesting.
everybody has to find
Mm.
a way to be efficient with their learning. Yeah, waste of time. You have to try things first in order to see that. Yeah, for me, conservatory didn't work that
Mm.
much in this sense. I learned much more in a more compressed
Mm.
way of learning things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a personal style and taste,
Interesting.
after all.
Interesting. So, how do you perceive theory about the music, especially our model music and Makam music?
Hmm. In general, I think theory comes as a consequence of practice,
Mm.
of the praxis.
Yeah.
In order to analyze, the entities that music provides,
Yeah.
all these compositions that at some point were performed by musicians, theory comes as a source of information to organize and to have
Mm.
a structure, to have the differences, the common ground.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's equally important at some point.
Mm.
Definitely think that it's a source of information very important to understand music as a whole.
Okay.
I wouldn't think I wouldn't think music uh, without theory
Mm.
as a learning tool, as a for example, you may play rhythms
Mm.
7, 9, 11, 10, 6, whatever,
Mm.
but if you don't understand the DNA of every rhythm, if you don't see it on a score, for example, on a paper,
Yeah.
if you don't do the analysis, you might not progress to the next level
Mm.
of of this would be to compose new music, for example.
Mm. So
To
theory can be a generic thing for everyone or a result of a personal individual experience in this case.
hmm, mostly a systematic way. I would say it's
Mm.
good that everybody knows the same laws of
Okay.
physics
Mhm.
or
Okay.
chemistry, but
Mm.
on a personal level, everybody understands it in a different way, of course.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
but I think
Mm.
as physics needs mathematics in order to
Mm.
form the foundations of the science, I think so as music needs
Yes.
the
Mm.
the theory to progress and to
Mm.
work together.
Wonderful. What about Macampedia? Two lines.
Markham Markham is an incredible work of a very close friend of mine, Michalis Kouloumis,
Yes.
with whom I had the great honor to meet him
Mm.
as a student in Codarts,
Yeah.
and we worked together on many directions,
Mm.
as well as in Macampedia. I remember I was might be the first
Mm.
to provide my knowledge to
Mm.
Macampedia as a source of
Mm.
material for his endeavor and his library
Mm.
of this Macampedia. Yeah.
Okay, I encourage the viewers to go ahead and see it.
Yes.
I think we took a lot of time. I really thank you very much, Mihalis. How are you accessible for any kind of a project, collaboration, lessons, whatever?
Uh, by email, of course, by my website, which is michaliskouloumis.com.
Mm.
In Facebook, I'm quite active.
Mm.
And then for those who are closer to me, by phone, of course,
Mm.
in Codarts as well,
Mm.
University Netherlands. I'm teaching as a visiting
Mm.
professor.
Okay. Thank you very much, really, Mihalis. This was a great time, really, with you. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed it too, Fadil, and I look forward for our
Mm.
second part of our
Sure.
interview.